Hi guys, it is Tamra. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the 14 things that parents blame their children for, and there's a component of trauma involved in this. And one of the reasons why is because children who are blamed by their parents, they often don't go too far in life as adults, and there's a reason why. And so I'm going to try to highlight that in today's video. Let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For all of you who are subscribed and participating, thank you so much. And for those who are new, I encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing and validating community. And in case you don't know who I am, let me go ahead and briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamra, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families as well as adults. Let's go ahead and jump in. When you think about parental mental illness, I want you to think about those parents who tend to blame their children for everything. They struggle to take responsibility for their own behaviors, and they also struggle to manage their children in an appropriate way. And one of the reasons why they blame their children is because it's so much easier. It's easier to blame than it is to see the problem and fix the problem. So why not just blame my child for all of the different things I'm going to talk about in today's video? But first, I want to give you some facts on parental mental illness that is going to be important to fully understanding this topic. Now, there's various research studies done on parental mental illness. Unfortunately, it's not made available to the public in a way that is reliable, scientific, and up to date. So if you Google parental mental health, you're probably going to find that there's not a lot of information out there for you. You're going to find some research studies from 2014 or 2015. You're not going to find anything that's really up to date and valuable. So, so that's an issue. But I'm going to try to provide as much detail in this video as I can for you and include some things in the description box as well. Okay? So I want you to kind of look at three things when you're thinking about parental mental illness, okay? Or parents who are blamers and parents who are controllers, right? They don't necessarily have to be mentally ill, but they have some sort of neuroticism about them. And I talk about neuroticism in this video right up here, so go ahead and check that out if you want to see what that's about as well. I kind of break it down for you. But parents who are neurotic or they have this undercurrent anxiety, they tend to impact kids in a very negative way. That doesn't mean that they have a mental illness. Okay, so just to clarify that. But I want you to think of three things. The first thing is parental mental illness. Okay, so as you watch this video, I want you to kind of ask yourself, is this parental mental illness? Is this, parental sociopathy, which is basically a sociopath is an individual, that doesn't tend to do well with managing relationships and showing empathy to other people and really being smart about emotional intelligence. Individuals who are sociopaths are incapable of that, and all over my channel I talk about sociopaths, so you can find those videos too. But I want you to consider, was my parent a sociopath? Or did my parent lack the maturity that was needed to be a good parent, to be an actual parent? And either way, right, whether it's a parent with mental illness, whether it's a parent who's immature, or whether it's a parent with sociopathy, they weren't able to manage you correctly as their child, and that's the biggest issue that we're talking about in this video. So I want you to kind of think of those three things as we go along, okay? Research on parents who are unstable, neurotic, whatever you want to call it, okay? So some research studies in the UK, the United Kingdom, suggest that 68% of women and 57% of men are struggling with a mental illness, and they tend to be parents, okay? So in the UK, 68% of women and 57% of men in the UK are struggling with mental illness, but they are also trying to be parents at the same time. And that's a tall order. Just think about it. You already have depression, you're already isolating, tearful, irritable, miserable, not feeling like you're yourself, not able to function like you're used to functioning, right? So you're trying to manage all of that, and then you've got to manage Michael's homework and his cyber schooling and his PTA meetings and taking him to school every day and fixing him breakfast and dinner and lunch and buying clothes and making sure he has school supplies and making sure that he's not doing things online that he shouldn't be doing, making sure that you're raising him correctly. Imagine how much more burdensome that would be if you had several kids, right? I see families of 7 sometimes. I see families of 10 sometimes, blended families. So, this gets worse as the child gets older, and it also gets worse as you add more children to the family. So that's something to think about as well. So these men and women are trying to manage their families, and they're not well themselves, and that doesn't go well, okay? Research also suggests, and this is worldwide, and this is actually a research study done. I'm going to put it in the description box below for you so you can go ahead and check that out. So this research study shows that worldwide, between 15 and 23% of individuals live with a parent who has a mental illness. This is worldwide. 15 to 23% of individuals live with a parent who has a mental illness. This is worldwide, and it is a tragedy. Especially if the mental illness is untreated, and especially if there's other things going on like a personality disorder or drug abuse, substance abuse, alcohol use, marijuana use, meth use, whatever the case may be, over-the-counter medications, prescription drugs abuse, right? Whatever it may be, if you add that on to the parental mental health, we're dealing with a very, very serious case here. So, there are some other things that I want you guys to think about too in this particular video, that there are also risk factors in these families where there's a parent with a mental illness. And that would include things like invalidation, right? Having a parent that invalidates you while trying to raise you. Another one is an inconsistent environment, if you have a parent who has a mental illness, you're going to have a parent most likely who's not getting treated. They're not able to see that they are detrimental or harmful to you. They have very low insight. And let me remind you that these are parents that are on, the moderate to severe side of mental illness. These are families and parents that don't care to get help, right? They know they're toxic, but they don't care to get help, or they're toxic and they don't know they need help, right? So these particular parents, they can really run a very inconsistent household, and they can also be very invalidating to you. And so these are the issues that are often faced with children, teens, adult children who are dealing with parents who have a mental health issue, sociopathy, or they're just immature. So what are some of the things that they blame you for? Well, let's go ahead and jump into that, okay? So the first thing that I have seen over my career, and research suggests this as well, I'll try to include some of that in the description box for you, but the number one thing that parents sometimes blame their children for is sexual abuse and incest. Can you imagine being raped, sexually abused, or some kind of incest happening in your home, and your parent tells you, "I don't believe you," or they give you the vibe that they don't believe you, or they send the indirect message through the way that they respond to the situation, "I don't believe you," right? So, this is a really interesting phenomenon, and most of the time the issue is not you if you were the victim. The issue is the parent. The parent either doesn't have the maturity or the skills to deal with what's going on. And so as a result, they block you. "No, that didn't happen." Or, "No, we're not going to talk about that." Or, "No, we're not going to go there. That's not going to be an issue that we're going to touch right now." Or they will minimize you, reduce you, and make you feel like something's wrong with you. And that causes you to go off, isolate, withdraw, and not say anything. You internalize. So there are some situations, very tragic situations, where the parent will blame the child for the rape, the sexual abuse, or the incest. It is a tragedy, and it's a traumatic event. We'll talk more about this as the year goes on, as we focus on traumatic families, okay? The next thing is divorce. I'm sure you have, if not amongst your friends or people you've had it in your family where, sometimes the parent will, blame the child for a divorce, whether that's a divorce from the biological parent or a divorce from the step parent. Whatever the case may be, they blame you. You know, you're the reason why me and Johnny could make it, and here's why. You're the reason why Stephanie and I could make it, and here's why. You never listened. You always created stress and chaos. You never let us create a comfortable, safe home. You're always the problem in this family. You're the black sheep of the family, and you need to learn how to listen. I've heard that before, and the parent just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's not the child's fault that the parent's marriage didn't work. The point of the matter is that the parent is blaming the child, and that is not okay, right? That's not okay. That's crossed boundaries. The reason the marriage didn't work and the reason why divorce is occurring is not because of the child. There are situations where that is the case, right? The stress of raising the child and so forth. But what I'm talking about here is a parent who can't take responsibility for their own failures, and so they put that on the child, okay? So the point of the matter is that they're blaming the innocent child for the failed marriage. That's not okay. Okay? The next thing that I have seen is poor mental health. Now, sometimes parents will say things like, I wouldn't be so depressed if you would just listen. If you weren't so oppositional defiant, if you didn't end up arrested, I probably wouldn't have PTSD. I probably wouldn't be so anxious and agoraphobic, right? So there are some parents who will do that, and they will take the responsibility off of themselves and how they've run their life and the decisions that they have made and the relationships that they have kept and the failed jobs that they have tried to, maintain, right? They will take all of that failure and place it on the child and say, you're the reason why I'm depressed. You're the reason why I'm anxious. You're the reason why I have flashbacks at night and night terrors and cold sweats. If you weren't so difficult, things would be a little bit easier around here. So there are families and parents who will put that on the child. That is how they operate. Another thing that you're likely to see is low income. Some families will blame the children. The parents will blame the children for not having enough funds to either pay the rent, buy groceries, buy clothing, school supplies, whatever the case may be. You're the reason why I can't afford to pay the rent around here because you always want something. Those are typically parents within neglectful and abusive households. And usually there's domestic violence, there's poverty, there's low socioeconomic status. There's lack of opportunity. There's a lot of frustration and pent-up anger in these particular families. And they will blame the child for having absolutely no money at all. Okay? No money at all. They'll blame the child. That's how they do it. Another thing, failed opportunities. If I hadn't gotten pregnant with you, I would have been able to go to Hollywood and become an actress. If I hadn't had you when I had you, I would have been able to have a successful life. I would have had more money and better opportunities. There are parents, and if you haven't had one, I'm sure you've heard of this. The parent will take all their pinned up frustration and anger that's been internalized because they have failed. They will take it and place it onto the child. And they actually raise the child as if the child's a burden. And that individual grows up into adulthood and they begin to do the same thing either to their own children or they begin to displace responsibility. I talk about displacement and other defense mechanisms right up here in this video if you want to check that out. It's a defense mechanism that really works sometimes. The parents will say things like, you're the reason why I have had failed opportunities. And the child will actually carry that burden into adulthood. And then there's low self-esteem, and there's suicidal thoughts, and there's self-harm, and there's a lot of failure in that child's life as an adult. Because, hey, I would have had a better life if it wasn't for you. I mean, imagine living with that in your mind all the time, right? Imagine living with that. It's really difficult. All right. The next thing is financial instability. Now, what I mean by this, because I kind of mentioned that earlier, but what I mean by this, guys, is that this particular parent will say, I've had to take out loans because of you to pay for your college education. I've had to borrow against, that estate over there, or borrow against my mortgage just to pay for your wedding. Or I had to go to Aunt Niecy and get a loan over $12,000, over $5,000 just to make sure that you had the best of everything. They will bring those things up over and over and over when you don't meet their expectation. Their expectations here, you're here, they will bring it up. Look at everything I've done for you. Why can't you do this thing for me? It's an abusive tactic. It's emotional abuse and psychological manipulation. The next thing is no or low education. No or low education. I didn't go to college because I had to have you. I didn't go to tech school because I had to pay for your diapers. Even when you got to high school, I didn't go back to school because I wanted to make sure that you had the best of everything. Parents will do this. They will blame you for having to survive. And it's easier to do that than to take responsibility for their own behaviors. The next thing, guys, is reputation. Some parents will say the reason why we don't have family friends and the neighborhood doesn't like us right now is because you were running the streets. You were making very poor decisions. You really embarrassed us in this neighborhood. How could you do that to us, right? There are some families who are so superficial and so shallow and so kind of, warped in their mind about reputation that they will blame you for what you have done growing up, or what you have done because of pain in your life, or because of a situation you've encountered, or because of an incident that happened, right? They will blame you and hold you accountable for a very long time because that's the only way that they know how to communicate with you. That's the only way that they know how to parent. It's from a distance, and it's no accountability. It's you. That's the goal here. The goal is to make sure that they put the responsibility onto you, and that is not okay. All right? The next thing, guys, that you are likely to see is a parent who blames you for their suicidal thoughts or their suicide attempts. This is tragic, and this is tragic because a parent who decides to commit suicide, a parent who does that doesn't have the right to blame the pressure of being a parent to you on that. Parenting is difficult. Parenting involves a lot of giving, right? The parent has to be very selfless. And if it's a hard life, homelessness, drugs, low income, the list goes on, then it's really easy for that parent to say, I can't do this, I need to check out. Makes total sense. But if you have a parent who's a problematic parent, and they've always been a problematic parent, then it's really easy for them to take their problems and displace it onto you and say, you're the reason why I wanted to commit suicide the other day. You're the reason why I'm having suicidal thoughts. You're the reason why I don't have a life that I would like to have. Again, it's the blame game. That's how they do it. That's the way they want it to be. And so sometimes parents will, if they're very, very unstable, if there's borderline personality disorder that's not treated appropriately or it's untreated, if there's sociopathy, narcissism, if there's bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 disorder, then these particular parents really react in a very intense and angry way. And they will blame you for going to commit suicide. They will blame you for having suicidal thoughts. That's the only way that they know how to communicate, really, of how they're feeling. That's really it. They're limited in their emotional flexibility. They don't have that emotional flexibility like a mature adult would. So sometimes they go to these lethal means and they'll blame you for the poor outcome. The next thing, guys, is self-harm. We might as well throw that in here. Cutting, burning, scratching, head banging, whatever, right? Scraping themselves, and they'll blame it on you. They'll blame it on having to be a parent. They'll blame it on you doing the wrong thing in school the other day, or you not falling in line appropriately. It's always something, and so, they will definitely blame you for that. And we can sweep that under the rug or sweep that under the heading, I should say, of suicide, right? Suicide and self-harm. Those are usually one and the same sometimes, meaning that they occur together. Not always, but most of the time, if somebody's thinking self-harm, they might be thinking suicide too. So those particular parents may do both. They may self-harm or they may try to commit suicide. Either way, those two, we can put it together and say these kind of parents may go to either one of those things just to numb their pain or to displace. Okay? The next thing is fatigue and irritability, impulsivity. They will blame that on being a parent. I'm so tired trying to raise you all the time that, I don't know what I was thinking, You're the reason why I'm this way. Like, ever since I gave birth to you, it's been a really difficult road. They'll say things like that. Sometimes they will also blame their children for getting into bad relationships, stormy relationships, drug dealing situations, bad or dead-end relationships, or bad and dead-end jobs. They will blame for all of that. It's a lot easier. Keep that in mind, guys. The key word in this video is accountability. And a lot of times when they don't want to take accountability, they blame the child. They blame the child. It's easier. It's a defense mechanism. It's a coping skill, if you will. That's all they have, and that's all they got, and they're going to use it. Unfortunately. The next is parental authority. There are some parents that feel like the reason I'm so mean and the reason I'm so angry and the reason I'm so authoritarian, like a Hitler, is because of you. I was never this way until you got here. You've messed with my mental health. You've messed with my level of patience. You've really bothered me in terms of my irritability, my level of pleasure and happiness in life. I'm this way because of you. I was never this mean until I had you, until you came along, until you started behaving this way, until you got a mental illness, until you attempted to commit suicide. Again, blame, blame, blame. And last but not least, some parents will also blame you for the grief that they feel. The grief of being a parent, right? My mother used to say it all the time, being a parent is the hardest job in the world. And so, I just remember thinking, oh my God, do I really want to be a mom one day? I do, but I have in the back of my mind that this is a difficult plight. It's difficult. And so, when you're a female alone, you're a single parent, or you have a mental illness, or you have a behavioral disorder, or you have a medical condition, or you're being, you're just being stressed out by life, you're homeless, whatever the issue may be, it's really easy to fall into these behaviors. Now, if you are a parent who is emotionally immature and selfish, narcissistic, it's really easy for you to, fall into these holes and begin to blame. And these kind of parents, guys, they do blame when they're emotionally immature, when they're psychologically immature, when they're narcissistic, when they're sociopaths. It really depends on what spectrum that parent is on. And on that scale, I try to get you guys to view mental illness on a spectrum and on a scale from mild, moderate to severe. I say that all the time. So, if you keep that in mind, you can kind of rate your parent. Where were they on this spectrum? Were they mild, moderate, or severe? Where would I put them? And that's really going to determine, what your resiliency is going to be. I'll post my video up here where I talked about the ACE questionnaire, and there's also a video that I did on the Resiliency Questionnaire as well. I'm going to go ahead and post it up here for you if you want to check that out. And here's a video right over here that I did. It's a very, 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 very popular video on parental mental health. And there's a video right down here for you as well. So go ahead and check those things out, guys. This is a really tough topic, and I'm going to continue to focus on this because it has a lot to do with everything we talk about on this channel. Trauma, parental mental illness, sociopathy, narcissism, intergenerational trauma. It's all intertwined. So you're going to see that on this channel, and you're going to see more of that as we go along this year. Thank you so much for being with me today, guys, in this video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us. I hope the audio difficulties in these videos have been improved, so let me know if you guys are still having issues with that. I think I'm hearing it right, but who knows, because I use several cameras in front of me, so let me know if this is an issue. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.